The prairie evening was painted in streaks of orange and gold as the sun lowered behind the hills. But what should have been a peaceful sight was broken by the rising smoke curling into the sky from the far end of the ranch. She had come to feed the horses earlier in the evening, never imagining that someone's cruel hand would lock her inside just as the smell of kerosene reached her nose and the crackling sound of fire began to consume the air. Panic surged through her veins as she banged against the wooden planks, coughing, the flames crawling across the hay bales and licking their way up the rafters. She screamed until her throat ached, but the ranch was quiet, deserted. The only sound the roar of fire that grew more merciless by the second. The heat pressed against her skin, sweat dripping down her face, fear knotting in her chest as smoke thickened, making her eyes water and her lungs burn. Out on the dirt trail, a lone rider appeared, Jacob, the cowboy who had worked these lands for years, a man known for his quiet strength and steady hands. He spotted the rising smoke and spurred his horse into a gallop, the pounding hooves echoing his racing heart, the fire raging higher with every gust of wind. His instincts told him someone was inside. He had seen Clara enter earlier and never come out. Without hesitation, he yanked the reins, his horse charging straight toward the burning structure. Flames leapt outward as though to drive him back, but Jacob leaned low, eyes narrowed against the smoke, determination hardening his jaw. He would not let fear win. He would not let her die. Inside, Clara fell to her knees, the smoke choking her breath, her strength fading. Just as despair began to close in, she heard the thunder of hooves outside and the sharp splintering sound of wood breaking. Jacob's boot crashed against the barn doors, swinging them wide enough to let in a rush of smoky daylight. Through the haze, Clara saw him silhouetted against the inferno, his face streaked with ash, his voice calling her name with urgency. "Clara, come on." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Without another thought, Jacob dismounted, rushing into the flames with his bandana pulled up against the smoke. He reached her in moments, his strong hands gripping her arms, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. Clara felt the world spin as he hoisted her against his chest, his heartbeat pounding like a drum of determination. The fire roared louder, beams beginning to collapse, sparks raining down like fiery snow. Jacob wasted no time. With Clara clinging to him, he pushed through the smoke, guiding her out of the collapsing barn. His horse stood waiting, ears back, sensing the danger but loyal to its rider's command, his arm holding her securely. Flames exploding into the night sky. They burst through the smoke, racing into the open air, the wind whipping against their faces, the fire glowing ominously behind them. Clara gasped, her lungs finally filling with clean air. Clara buried her face against Jacob's chest, overwhelmed by relief, while Jacob focused on steadying the horse, his mind replaying the sight of her trapped inside the fire. Every second he had been late could have cost her life, and he knew he would never forgive himself if he hadn't made it in time. When they finally slowed near the edge of the pasture, Clara looked up at him, her voice trembling. "You saved me. I thought I was going to die in there." Jacob glanced down at her, his eyes intense yet gentle. "Not while I'm around. I'll always come for you." Those words, spoken with a quiet conviction, carried more weight than any promise she had ever heard. The ranch hands, who had seen the smoke, came running, astonished to find the cowboy and the woman alive, emerging from what looked like certain death. Clara was helped down from the horse, though she refused to let go of Jacob's hand, her fingers clutching his like a lifeline. The barn was gone, reduced to smoldering ruins, but what mattered most had been saved. As the night deepened, the flames eventually died, leaving only ash and memory. Yet the bond forged in those moments of fire and fear was something unbreakable. Clara realized that courage wasn't just about running into flames. It was about having the heart to protect someone, no matter the cost. Jacob, though humble and quiet, became a hero that night, not because he sought glory, but because he acted when no one else could. The tale spread through town. Quickly the cowboy who rode through smoke and carried her out. For Clara, it was more than just a story of survival. It was proof that even in the darkest moments, hope can ride in, strong and steady, carrying you into the light. It tests, and it reveals who we really are. Friends, if this story touched your heart, Remember that every tale we share carries a spark meant to inspire, to move, and to remind us of courage and love. If you want more powerful and emotional stories like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Join our family of storytellers and never miss the next journey into drama, hope, and unforgettable moments. Subscribe today, and together we'll keep the fire of storytelling alive. For the night after the fire carried a silence that felt heavy, broken only by the faint crackle of embers smoldering where the barn once stood, casting a dull glow against the wide prairie sky. Clara sat on the porch of the ranch house, wrapped in a blanket though the air was still warm, her body trembling not from the cold, but from the memory of how close she had come to death. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames curling toward her, felt the thick smoke clawing at her lungs, and then the sight of Jacob's determined face pushing through the fire to reach her. That moment replayed over and over, both terrifying and comforting. Terrifying because of the danger, comforting because of the proof that someone had risked everything to save her. Jacob, meanwhile, was in the stables with his horse, running his hand along the animal's neck, whispering soft words of gratitude. He knew he owed the horse just as much as his own courage. Without the animal's speed and loyalty, they might not have made it out alive. But behind his quiet strength, Jacob's thoughts turned darker. He knew Clara hadn't locked herself in that barn. Someone had wanted her trapped. Someone had wanted her gone. As the dawn came, Clara finally found her voice, her hair loose, her eyes still red from the smoke. He turned, his gaze steady, though shadows of worry flickered behind it. "I need to know," she whispered. "Was it an accident, or did someone mean for me to die?" Jacob paused, his hand tightening on the reins he held. He had been asking himself the same question all night, piecing together the smell of kerosene, the way the door had been bolted from the outside, the eerie quiet that had hung over the ranch before the fire erupted. He could have lied, could have reassured her with gentle words, but his nature was honesty forged by hardship. "Clara," he said slowly, "that fire wasn't just chance. Someone set it. Someone wanted you trapped." The words hit her like a stone, and she staggered back, clutching the blanket tighter around her. Fear flickered in her eyes, but so did something else: anger, a rising fire within her that no smoke could smother. The ranch hands gathered later that day, murmuring about what had happened, each with their own theory, but Jacob stayed close to Clara, his presence a shield against both gossip and threat. As they walked the scorched remains of the barn together, Clara's gaze fell on the blackened beams, the twisted metal of tools, the melted remnants of what had once been her routine chores. "Why me?" she asked, her voice cracking. Jacob's jaw tightened. "Because you're stronger than they think, and people who are afraid of strength try to destroy it." He glanced at her, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart pound. "But they didn't count on me being there, and I'm not going anywhere. Clara, whoever's behind this, they'll have to go through me first." His vow wrapped around her like a promise of steel, one she hadn't known she needed until it was spoken. In the days that followed, others claimed the fire was an accident, but the truth was a thread that both she and Jacob held tightly to, determined to unravel. Jacob began asking questions, following tracks, studying footprints near the barn that didn't belong to him or the hands. Clara, though shaken, began to stand taller, finding her courage in the face of fear. At night, when the sky was crowded with stars, she would sit by the porch with Jacob, a bond forged not just in fire but in trust. She found herself drawn to the steadiness in his eyes, the way he carried the weight of the world without complaint, and Jacob found himself drawn to her resilience, her spirit that refused to break. One evening, as they sat watching the horizon, Clara turned to him, her voice soft but certain. "You risked your life for me, Jacob. Why?" For a long moment, he didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the fading light, the memories of his past flickering in his mind. Loss, regret, promises he hadn't kept. Then he looked at her, his expression open and raw. "Because losing you wasn't an option. Not for me." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and Clara felt something shift inside her, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire she'd escaped. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling as they brushed against his rough, calloused skin. For the first time since the barn, She felt safe not because the danger was gone, but because she wasn't facing it alone. But as much as they longed for peace, the shadow of whoever had set that fire still loomed. Clara knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be more trials, more questions, and more battles to fight. Yet when she glanced at Jacob, she saw a man who would ride through smoke and flames again, if it meant keeping her safe, and in that truth, she found strength she never knew she had. Together, they stood on the edge of something greater than survival. They stood at the beginning of a story, not just of fire and rescue. Dear friends watching this story unfold, if Jacob and Clara's journey has touched your heart, if it's reminded you of the power of courage, love, and loyalty, then don't just let this moment pass. Be part of the family that keeps these stories alive. Hit that subscribe button right now and join us as we share more tales of hope, drama, and inspiration. Together, we'll ride into more unforgettable adventures, because every story deserves to be told, and every heart deserves to be moved. The days that followed, the fire carried a tense quiet across the ranch, the charred wood standing like grave markers against the endless prairie sky. Jacob remained close, his steady presence like a wall of strength, but she could see the storm in his eyes, the determination to find out who had tried to kill her. The whispers in town grew louder. People spoke of jealousy, old grudges, debts unpaid, but none dared speak names aloud. Still, Jacob knew there was one man with enough bitterness in his heart to set fire to another's life. Silas Mercer, a rival rancher, whose greed for land had turned to hatred when Clara's family refused to sell him their acres, and Jacob suspected this fire bore his mark. Clara, though shaken, insisted she would not live in fear. "If Silas thinks he can burn me out, he's wrong," she said, her chin lifting despite the tremble in her hands. Jacob admired her courage but tightened his grip on his revolver. He knew men like Silas didn't stop until someone made them. One evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, Jacob saddled his horse with a grim expression. Clara came to him, her hair catching the last light of day, her voice quiet but firm. "You're going after him, aren't you?" He paused, then nodded. "I can't let this go, Clara. He'll try again. And next time, I might not get to you in time." Fear flickered in her eyes, but she stepped closer, resting her hand on his arm. "Then I'm coming with you." Jacob started to protest, but the fire in her gaze silenced him. She had walked through flames already. Her spirit was forged in them. Together, they rode out, the prairie wind cold against their faces, the night closing in as stars emerged like silent witnesses. They found Silas near the creek that cut through the land he had long coveted, his lantern casting a sickly glow over his camp. He was hunched, muttering to himself, nursing a bottle of whiskey. But when he saw Jacob and Clara approach, his eyes narrowed, and a cruel smile twisted across his face. Well, he sneered, his voice thick with venom. "Looks like the little bird flew out of the fire after all. Shame I was hoping the flames would finish what they started." Clara's breath caught. The truth laid bare, but Jacob's fury surged like a storm. "You tried to murder her, Silas. You locked her in that barn and lit it like kindling." "Why?" Silas stood, his shadow stretching long and menacing. "Why?" he spat. "Because she stands on land that should have been mine. Because her family thought they were better than me. I wanted you both gone." His hand slid toward the revolver at his hip. The standoff stretched in the night air, silence heavier than thunder. Clara's heart pounded, her hands clenched at her sides. But she stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You'll never have this land, Silas, and you'll never break me. You tried to bury me in fire." And in a flash, he drew his weapon. The gunshot cracked through the night, echoing across the plains, but Jacob's aim was true. Jacob advanced, his voice low and steady. "This ends tonight, Silas. You'll answer for what you did." Defeated, Silas stumbled back, his power drained, the fire of his hatred reduced to embers. Clara watched as the man who had tried to kill her shrank into nothing, more than a bitter shadow. His greed finally broken, Jacob tied him with rope and hauled him into town, where the sheriff, long wary of Silas's dealings, wasted no time locking him behind iron bars. For the first time since the fire, Clara felt the weight lift from her chest, her breath coming easier, her heart unburdened. When they returned to the ranch, dawn was breaking, the sky awash in gold and lavender, a promise of renewal after so much darkness. The ruins of the barn still smoldering, but no longer a place of fear. She turned to him, her eyes shining with tears. "You didn't just save me from that fire, Jacob, you saved me from him, from living in fear. I don't know how to thank you." From that day forward, the ranch became a place of rebuilding, not just of barns and fences, but of trust, hope, and a future that neither Clara nor Jacob had dared to dream before. The townsfolk whispered of the cowboy who rode through smoke and flames, of the woman who walked out of fire stronger than ever, and of the villain whose hatred had been consumed by his own downfall. But to Jacob and Clara, it was simpler. It was a story of courage, of loyalty, and of love that rose from ashes. They knew life would always carry hardship, that storms and fires might come again, but they also knew they would face them together, and together they were unbreakable. Friends, if this ending moved you, if Clara and Jacob's fight for survival and justice inspired you, then don't let this be the last time we share a moment like this. Hit that subscribe button right now and join us for more powerful stories of courage, love, and resilience. Subscribe today, and let's continue writing together through tales that burn bright in our hearts forever.